You're
Here
good.
on the top, I put salary, right? Different comparisons for different salary. And I'm still working on the 50 and 75 because I just added those in briefly. Then I also put in like the expenses, right? You know, you have your retirement, Medicare, Social Security, taxes. Those are all the things that are going to be required. And these are all generic terms. So like the way I did it is like, let's say I put it on there. I'll update it, but like I say, you're like, oh, I don't spend that much for your situation. No, you could put 350. It'll change everything. And like these are all lifestyles, right? So I put generic stuff: gas, internet, phone, streaming. Like these are all things, and this is by a per month basis. And then these are just multiplied by 12. Other big thing would be like vacations and trips. So I just put a generic number, like little trips, or maybe you save up a couple years. Car savings. I didn't put car payments because I don't believe in car payments, so I put car savings, which that's number two. Like all these are all, you know, like you said, just depends on your lifestyle, right? How you're gonna do it. I also put like for women, hair, nail maintenance, like hair for guys too, haircuts, stuff like that, and vehicle insurance, life insurance, other insurances you may have. I put gifts giving, just like a generic $200 per month. I put other things to consider. This is like personal things for me, but you know that I do. Like I put money away for ammo. Sometimes I also get a couple bottles for bar stuff. Women are makeup, clothing, personal money, security, which could be like you have security system, stuff like that. Other subscriptions, house upgrades, additional savings, medical expenses. But here, the biggest thing ever is the house, right? If you buy a house, if you're planning on buying a house, or if you currently have a house. So I got these generic numbers off the mortgage calculator. Here I put like, what do you have left if you were to make this much with these current expenses?
This is dope. First off, this whole thing is dope. I like how you broke this down. This is a great example to start off with.
Like this is all something that's it's relative to what you spend, right? Because like there's also vacation trips. Put the gym in here, like $50, but like.
Well, this goes, and I love that you brought this up because this is really, really going to help. This is really what I want to talk about. So this is what I mean and what I say by lifestyle, right? Because this goes back into the whole thing that, hey, you know what? You need to live off of less than what you make, right? So the most important thing out of all this shit, first off, will probably be the house, right?
Yeah.
And then after the house, then it's going to be utilities. So like light, water, you know what I mean? Different things like that. And then of course, there's some things that you may need to have, like medical insurance, you know what I mean? Maybe a phone or internet, gas. But besides that, everything else on here is a luxury, right? Like,
yeah, I would say, yeah.
There may be like, let's say, maintenance, right? Like how you put oil change, you know what I mean? Like maintenance category, which I would agree with. But besides that, though, everything else is a luxury. So like, for instance, gym, I do work out and I work out for free. My phone, I pay $300 for the year. My internet, it's about $100 a month, but that's because I have fiber. You know what I mean? And that's just because I choose to. Like if I wanted to go down, I could go down on that, you know? So it's just these things there. Oh, and groceries, of course, you need groceries. And see, look, like even groceries, like with me, I spend about $200 a month. This is all determined by your lifestyle and what lifestyle.
My idea when I did like groceries and all that was like two people, you know, not necessarily a kid.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So then with all this is just counting two people basically. Okay, that makes sense. So as far as with this, like this is why it's important for you to know and set the expectations of your lifestyle, like what you're going to go and set forth in the relationship, right? Because this is where I think a common mistake is for a lot of men is that the first date that they take out a girl, they take her to this extravagant place, you know what I mean? Or they take her to this crazy dinner, you know what I mean? They bring her all these gifts and all that stuff. Well, guess what? You just set the bar. You know what I mean? You just lined it up where, hey, you know what? This is what she should be expecting now. You know what I mean? Like, because this is basically what I've gotten. And once you start giving her less, it starts taking away like from who you are, the thrill, the whole attraction, right? Because it's like, well, it's kind of the example that we are talking about earlier. It takes away of the whole, hey, well, this isn't the way you were when we first met. You always like took me out. We always went out to eat. We always did all these things, whatever. And why is it now that we're doing less? You know, it's the same thing with, again, a woman. If when you first met her, she was fit, she was trim, she was fucking hot. Then all of a sudden she gained all this weight, and it's all like, oh shit, like, well, I'm not attracted to that shit anymore. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the way that it works for men and women. So I'm happy that you brought this up because it really gives a real insight as far as what your lifestyle dictates as far as how much money you make, right? Because obviously the more money that you make from these numbers, the more money that you make, well, then the better lifestyle that you can have. Groceries, household miscellaneous, gas, all that stuff, right? All those things, all those bills, they didn't change no matter how much money you're making, right? The only thing that changed really was the mortgages, really what home are you going to buy? And I think that that's important to talk about because typically when you make more money, you buy a bigger house. You get a more expensive car. And you said something that's very important that I think a lot of people should realize. You say you don't believe in car payments. I agree. And I actually think that people shouldn't have house payments either. I think that that's important. I think really people shouldn't have any payments, to be honest, except of course the normal utilities that you have to pay because you're basically paying for usage. You know what I mean? You're paying for that service or whatever, which I completely understand. With these certain things, you could get a cheaper house. You know what I mean? Even if it's just you and your spouse or whoever you're in a relationship with, you can have a 1-bedroom place. You know what I mean? Even if it's a house, you could build a tiny house. You know what I mean? And then, hey, you know what? If you have a child, you can add on to that house, or you could sell that one, buy another property. You know what I mean? Like there's other things there, but this is just important to go ahead and see, because like you said, it dictates your lifestyle. If your lifestyle is less, if you live off of less than what you make, then you're going to be able to go ahead and do more of these certain things or allocate money in certain areas. And if you combine that with making more money, then shoot, you're going to be even better. You know what I mean? Like this is going to be even larger. You can do even more. So I think it's great that you brought this up because it gives both ends of the spectrum, right? And I think that as far as with the man, what you should do, and typically men do this already, but for some reason it changes when you get into a relationship, is start off with understanding your finances, understanding where all your money is going, and spend less on these certain things. And I think it's important to do that while you're working on your money. And it's important to set that expectation when you get into a relationship as well. Because as your money goes up, you may be able to afford a little bit more quality things, nicer things. But I truly, genuinely believe that your lifestyle should not change. And majority of the time, your lifestyle is not going to change. So if you live on that high life, spending all this money going out on credit cards, all this stuff, guess what? Even when you make more money, you're still going to be living that lifestyle. If you make less money, you're still going to try to do whatever you can to try to live that lifestyle.
I agree. People think when they, as you mentioned, oh, if I just make more money, my problems are going to be solved. But money just makes you more of what you already are. So, if you don't handle your money correctly now, you're not going to handle your money correctly when you get more money. That's just how it is, And it could be like, oh, you know what? Maybe you do good for a little while, but if you're not your lifestyle, it's not what you do day in and day out. It's not going to work properly. So, this is like, the spreadsheet I made. It's a lot, but like I said, and you mentioned the key thing is this mortgage. Obviously, that's like one of the huge expenses. And you could definitely eliminate that with, if you live somewhere else, tiny home, whatever, And this is just what I did. Like the property tax, I looked up the average property tax in Texas. So it was about 1.6%. And I can tell you where I live, it's more like closer to 2%. So that like would go up for me, for example, and the rates. If you already bought a house years ago, your rate could be cheaper. If you're buying a house now, that rate's more likely. So I just kind of did it off today's standards. And I just put a 5% down. That's assuming that's what you're going to do. So like you said, all stems from lifestyle. There's, things you could do yourself. Like if you want to do your own oil change, you could minimize those costs. If like you said, you did a haircut, and if you're a woman, women don't like this, but they could buy stuff to do their own hair or buy stuff to do their own nails or whatever, stuff like that. You definitely could.
I think a lot of people are gonna love this as well, especially making this available to them, just so that they can kind of like tweak the numbers, see exactly what they have. A lot of times, what it is just providing this piece of information, this tool, so that they can go ahead and use just to take that first step.
Quick go back for like mortgage, like that's one of the other biggest things I think people get in over their head on is like they're what people would call a house poor. So like a good general rule would be like 25% of your take home, if you are getting a mortgage, right? Uh, don't become house poor because that's probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make. If you're not prepared, right? Uh, and two, like people, there's like there's a common thing that people like say like, oh, if you're renting, you're throwing away your money, and it's like I don't necessarily agree with that because what you're doing is you're getting a service, right? You're paying for a house, right? You don't got to do maintenance, you don't got to cut the grass, you don't got to do like all that stuff, right? When you get a house, now you got to do the maintenance, or you got to find someone, right? If you have an electrical problem and you're renting, you just call the office. Hey, this is a problem here. If you're a house owner, your own house. Now you got to call an electrician or find someone to come do it for you, and then you got to pay them, right? So there's a lot more additional costs that comes with housing. Plus, when you have your own house, you want it to be nice, right? You want to maintain it. You want to okay, I gotta paint the trim once a year or whatever, right? Whatever maybe you gotta keep up with the stuff outside. And you also want as a new homeowner, I want to have like a nice yard. I want to have stuff like that. All that stuff costs extra money. So you also got to take all that into consideration. So it happens a lot where people become house poor. They buy a house more than they think they can. And the other thing is these are all the minimum payments on a 30-year loan. When you actually get a house, you don't want to be paying a house for 30 years, right? So this is like minimum payments. So you also got to think about you should and make extra payments to pay that down. 15 years, 10 years or less, right? So those are all, and I did it that way because that's like the normal thing. But I definitely would say you want to plan to do a 15-year mortgage if you can. And if you can't, that means you buy a house that's too expensive for you, basically. So, I know there's other things to do. I know there's people will say you actually how do you say it? You get behind that way because they're like the argument for people, and these are all valid arguments because if you run the numbers, they're actually true. Like, hey, instead of paying extra on your mortgage, use that extra money and go and investing it, and you'll actually make more money. And if you run the numbers, most of the times that's true. But the problem is you have to actually do it to make the extra money. So most of the times people don't have that discipline to put the money aside extra. If you do the 15-year, you're gonna force yourself to pay because that's what your payment is, right? You have to make that payment. So that would what I say as far as mortgages. And once again, guys, it's not financial advice. This is just an opinion. Our opinions on what we see, learn from people. Don't become house poor. And if you have made that choice, like if you've already done it in the past, you realize, I'm house poor. Like I spend over 25% of my take home pay on my mortgage or whatever, then time to sit down and make that mature decision to potentially sell the house, and downsize. So it sucks hearing that, right? Because maybe you have a nice home, maybe you have your dream home, what you think is your dream home, and it's not worth the stress. It's not worth. It could cause arguments if you argue with your wife about it. It's not worth that. It's not worth. Maybe you have to work extra hours to do all this stuff, spend time away from your family. I don't think it's worth that, especially if you have kids. I definitely don't think it'd be worth it just to have a bigger house or just to keep up with the Joneses. It's I grew up in a smaller house, which is fine. It was great. I'm saying kids. They just want to have memories with you and spend time with you. And it's not worth that, if you're working 60 hours a week and can't see your kids because you can't afford your house or you can't afford your lifestyle. It's just, then you're not like, who's raising your kids, right? Now, obviously, you got your spouse, but as a man, you need to have that influence, especially if you have some stuff too as well.
I will tell you this: if you don't have at least $100 left a month, which is not a lot, if you don't have $100 left every month, you're living paycheck to paycheck. Like, you may say, oh no, like I'm making it, I'm paying all my bills. Yeah, you're living paycheck to paycheck. You know what I mean? Like, you are not, you don't have, you're not living off of less than what you make. And you need to do that because, knock on wood, even if you have a savings on the side or anything like that, you put $100 a month aside or anything like that. If something major happens, you're not going to be ready. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be set. If all of a sudden you have that unexpected baby or whatever, you know what I mean? Or unexpected loss, you know what I mean? Like, whether that's a property loss or even somebody loses their life and you have to kind of step up in that position. Like, money makes everything easier. You know what I mean? And you want to go ahead and have that money. It's not worth, I will go ahead and tell you that from experience, it's not worth the actual lifestyle, doing all these things that you spend all your money on, that you're not making any memories with. It's not building you up. You know what I mean? What you're doing is you're literally just throwing away your money to the system. And you don't want to do that. You want to invest in yourself. You want to invest in your family. You want to put your money towards all these things that are going to invest in you. And like you said, you brought up a great point, is that, even myself as well, like, I lived in a smaller house growing up and stuff like that. And that didn't dictate whether I had a happy life or not a happy life. You know what I mean? And children don't care about that. Really, they don't. They care about being with you. You know what I mean? They care about that time. And you start realizing as you get older, that time is worth everything. So make sure that, you're really looking at what you're spending on. You really look at yourself and your lifestyle and realize like where you're going and what you're going with, because as a man, money is like one of the most biggest things, that's why it's a pillar for us. You know what I mean? It's one of the biggest things to your life. So like Sal said, don't be house poor. Like, understand your money, understand where everything's going, because if you don't, then you're forever just going to be trapped. You as a man, that financially, your income, what you spend on your lifestyle is important. Like, this is, especially if you're going to lead the relationship, which you should, you need to look at these things. Just like Sal said, you have to be serious about this, especially if, you're in a relationship or in a marriage or want a relationship or a marriage.